So in this industry, there is plenty of monkey see, monkey do. One person starts a trend and the ripple effect is quickly behind it. And most recently, I've seen people do their top 12 teams. Basically, it's a play on top 10 teams, but with the college football playoff being 12 teams, now you're throwing in a group of 5 school. And I figured that's not what we're going to do here on SEC Unfiltered. But I do want to talk about the playoff every single week. So what I'm going to do is list off my pretenders, wait and see, and contenders after every single week. So naturally, this video is talking about who has impressed and who has laid down the line going into 2024. What's going on, SEC Unfiltered? It's Cole Thompson here. Make sure that you like the video, hit the ring notification, and of course, hit subscribe down below because this is your news source for all things SEC football. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow us on the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at SEC Unfiltered. Follow me on Twitter, at Mr. Cole Thompson, my own YouTube channel, at Mr. Cole Thompson. And to check out all of our great work, make sure you visit secunfiltered.com. This episode is brought to you by RHOBACK. Look good, feel good this upcoming fall on game days with RHOBACK.com by using the promo code SECU for 20% off your first purchase on joggers, polos, hoodies, shorts. You want to be dressed to the nine this fall? Do so at RHOBACK.com. So this list is going to be interchangeable. Just because if you're in the pretender category doesn't mean you can't shoot up. Just because you're in the contender category doesn't mean you're going to be there all week. So let's not waste any time. Let's start off with the pretenders. Number 1, Kentucky. Good God. Good God. Defensively, I think it can be correctable. You look at this team and the way the big blue wall was able to penetrate Southern Miss, the way they were able to get after Lenore Sellers at times, the way they were able to limit South Carolina's run game. There's a lot to like about that front seven. The secondary, not so much. The offensive line, the other BBW, not so much. And the quarterback situation is absolutely egregious at best. Brock Vandergrift, I figured was going to be an ideal fit for Bush Handham's style of play. It just doesn't feel like that. He doesn't seem comfortable. He's thrown multiple interceptions, including a pick 6 last week against the Gamecocks. And ultimately, it just feels like that maybe Mark Stoops is running out of time. The locker room has got to realize that this was a guy that tried to leave the program last year. It was very clear that he wanted to get down to Texas A&M, wanted to be the next head coach in the heir apparent of Jimbo Fisher. And there have been rumors and speculation for a while that if the job ever opened up in Iowa City, he would go back to his alma mater. It feels like the writing is on the wall that Stoops has done a lot of good in Lexington, but maybe his time is no longer efficient out for a program at Kroger Field. Auburn, I have only one thing to say. This loss is on you. This loss is on you, Hugh Freeze. It's not on the players. It's not on the roster. Yes, you are a team that never was meant to be a college football playoff contender this year. And certainly you could have been one of those rosters that found a way to be the spoiler for some people. But when you constantly are holding out hope that things are going to turn the corner for Peyton Thorne and this offense, you are actually hurting your roster, not helping anyone. You're not helping Peyton Thorne's confidence. You're not helping his social media face. You're not helping his mental state. You're not helping your offense improve. And certainly there are bigger flaws than the number 1 quarterback for your squad. But ultimately, 4 turnovers in a game that you lose by 7 points should be the writing on the wall. This is as good as it gets with this version of the QB. So it's time to possibly make a change. And if you don't make a change, especially before the start of conference play, you might end up sitting at 0-2 in games that probably were winnable. Let's talk about Mississippi State. This was always going to be a rebuilding year for Jeff Levy. I did not think that the defensive line was going to be that atrocious at times, especially in the run defense. I knew that this passing attack would be potent. You're watching as Kevin Coleman has established himself as a quality number 1 receiver for Blake Shapen. I don't know what to make of the ground game. The one thing that you know about Jeff Levy's offense is when you're able to spread it, but also have a balanced, consistent rushing attack, it is lethal. And there's a reason why those down in Starkville believe that, like those cowbells ringing in your ears, they could be a thorn in your side for defensive coordinators. But it has to work on both levels. So far, the passing attack has been promising. So far, the wide receiver core has looked its best. The secondary has played up to par at times. But the run defense, that second-level linebackers, the offensive line, and really just the rushing attack has hindered Jeff Levy to be able to reach that next level. There are some people that believe that potentially Toledo is going to march on in to Starkville and get a dub. And honestly, it's not that far-fetched to believe that it could at least go down to the wire. Arkansas, I really want to believe in Sam Pittman. I really want to believe in this offense. I really want to believe that things will turn the corner at some point. But I can't. Too many self-inflicted wounds. And this is not a first-year thing. It's much like Peyton Thorne. You have years of track record to back it up. that this might be as good as it gets. The better team on the field on Saturday was not Oklahoma State, that now gets to sit with a dub against an SEC team. The better team on the field was 3/4 of Arkansas football and then a 4th quarter of mediocrity and bumbling mistakes. That's what we saw against a team in Boone Pickens Stadium. And I'm not going to go ahead and sugarcoat it. When you allow a program that's led by Mike Gundy to hang around late, they're probably going to walk away with the win, or at least make things interesting by going to double overtime. But ultimately, the muff punt, the inconsistency on offense, the inability to go for it on 4th down and just take the points with the field goal, the insecurity of the big plays downfield that were given up by pass interference calls, it ultimately is just feeling like the writing is on the wall, that change is inevitable out in Fayetteville. You return home for the first time this season to play against UAB. Maybe you'll be able to turn the corner. I will say this. The good thing that you have is the price of admission to watch Taylon Green sling it around the football field is worth 3 hours of whatever football that does take the field on Saturdays. Let's talk about Florida. They also are in the pretender category. You can't tell me that a 5-star quarterback that looked really good against a high school team is going to be the reason why you have turned the corner. You still have questions when it comes to your tackling. You still have questions when it comes to your offensive line. Montreal Johnson looks phenomenal in the backfield, but that's been your one saving grace against a quality opponent. You play Texas A&M this week. I think right now you got to go with the hot hand and just trust that Lagway will be able to produce. If not, you turn back to Graham Mertz. Or if you turn to Graham Mertz, you have to have plays involved that are going to allow number 2 to at least be a number 1 threat. There's weapons. There's talent. Nobody is doubting that down in Gainesville, there are pieces in play to where the Gators can at least keep things fun. They can make a bowl game. They could potentially even be the talk of the early part of October with wins over, say, Tennessee. But ultimately, it just feels like getting a win over Samford is not enough for me to go ahead and say you've entered the conversation of let's wait and see. And the same thing goes for Texas A&M. Now, after this week, depending on how these two teams perform, maybe one of you gets to jump into that category, catapult yourself into the conversation. But as of this moment, you didn't have an elite performance from Connor Wigman as the passing. It was good, a lot better, but you expected that against McNeese State. You also look at the way that this offense ran with Le'Veon Moss. You have to hope that that can be your ground game, and that can be sustainable for 10 more games this upcoming year. Defensively, there were some question marks, especially when it comes to the front seven. I thought that even though you were a more powerful team than it looked on paper, it still wasn't the best. Same with the offensive line. Wide receivers are still trying to find their stride. And naturally, again, playing a Cowboys roster versus a Gators roster are going to be two separate entities. But I do wonder, can you deliver the fight, the gusto, the ambiance, the physical force, the way that you did against McNeese at home on the road in the Swamp, especially at a 3:30 kick? Because that's going to be, I think, a major factor in this game. Let's go into the wait and see category. These are teams I don't have enough information on right now. I think that they could be contenders. I think that they could be pretenders. I got to see a little bit more. Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's awesome. Diego Pavia Power is killing it. We are all fans of number 2 for the Commodores. Anchor down is 100% back. And largely that's due to going down with the ship. Clark Lee realized this is a pivotal year for his tenure with this program. I'm going to call the defensive plays, and it's a night and day difference. They play down to the wire and get the massive win in overtime over Virginia Tech. They look night and day difference on all 3 phases against Alcorn State. Now you go play on the road against Georgia State. You're a better team than Georgia State, but we have watched in the past as a team like Vanderbilt plays down to competition. Can Pavia Power stay alive? Can your run game be established? Can a number 1 wide receiver take that next step? Do you feel like that you got quality play in the interior of your defensive line? Because if you do that on the road, even if it is a close call, now you get to feel like going next week against Missouri, that things could be interesting. Nobody is saying that you are going to be a college football playoff contender. In fact, I think most fans of the Doors simply just want to go to a bowl game and not have to sit at home while everybody else in the SEC is partying in December. That might be what they're looking for. But for me personally, I just want to see if this team can carry that same aura away from First Bank Stadium that they do when they're playing in the Nash City. So I think that they can be a good team. I don't know what to expect right now. South Carolina, same thing. It's a Jekyll and Hyde effect. I am one of the biggest South Carolina fans on this channel. In fact, I would say I am the biggest South Carolina fan on this channel. But it is such a unique situation that we're talking about. When you play against an Old Dominion, you play down to the competition. You don't look great. Your offense was anemic at times. You make blundering mistakes. Yes, you get a big touchdown in the red zone from Rocket Sanders, but you also watch as Lenore Sellers trips his running back and he makes the tackle. But then you play Kentucky and you own Kentucky. And that's just one thing that Shane Beamer could throw on the specs and say, I'm better than you, suck it. That is the way he can act if he wants to, because now he's 3-1 and 3-0 in the last 4 years against Mark Stoops. And they've dominated against that team. Defensively, they looked the part. I told you guys at the start of the offseason, the thing that was going to keep Kentucky in games is the fact that they have a defense that will keep drives silent. They will find ways to blanket coverages. They will find ways to sniff out plays and get a 3-and-out and get the ball back for multiple opportunities for this Gamecock offense. And the other part that's really important is that even though he wasn't perfect, Lenore Sellers hit on the big-time plays. Mazzo Bennett, 32-yard game. Simon in the end zone for a 16-yard score, placing yourself inside the red zone for a Rocket Sanders blast-off touchdown. That's what you get in Sellers. But can you put it all together? You know what you're getting in Kennard and Stewart coming off the edge. You know what you're getting in Eman Worry in the backfield. You know what you're getting in Williams at linebacker. What can you get consistently from this offense? Can you get a number one receiver? And also, you have been building for this moment. I have been very clear that I think South Carolina has been waiting to knock on the door about being a legit contender in the SEC, especially with Beamer. You watch the way that he's coached. Double more than wins he should have gotten in 2021. Got 8 wins in 2022. We're all allowed to have a regressional session. It's like literally one bad week at work. It doesn't define you as a person. But can you finally break through that door? Can you be the one that's standing on the other side, like Big Bird when he's kicking down the door? Can you be that team that delivers the punch? And by the way, you're going to have a pretty quality opponent to do it against this weekend with College Game Day and basically the entire SEC nation paying attention to you, because LSU is not going to go down without a fight. Speaking of which, LSU, offensively, the passing attack is potent. When you get a guy like Garrett Nussmeier to deliver on all the bells and whistles, how are you not doubting him? Because honestly, the kid's looked phenomenal. He has been one of the few bright spots in an offense that really is underachieved for my money. 610 passing yards, 8 touchdowns, 1 interception, a completion percentage of 75 yards. Kyron Lacey looks phenomenal. TJ Daniels, Aaron Anderson, Mason Taylor, Xavier Thomas, they've all stepped up. You're seeing what this offense can be at its peak. But you're also seeing a team like Nicholls State hang around a little bit too close for comfort. You are seeing the way that they are disrespecting LSU's offense by crowding the box and saying, we're making you win through the air because we know that you don't have a ground game. And they don't. Joshua Williams hasn't looked good. You lose Emory for the entire season with a torn ACL. Your defense looks better with Blake Baker, but Rome wasn't built in a day, and you're not going to be able to do what you did against Nicholls State in the second half against opponents in the SEC. So against a South Carolina team that still is putting together its offensive philosophy, is still putting together its offensive identity, can you be the one to step up and actually be a team that comes out on top? Can you be the one to force those mental mistakes defensively? Can your secondary be the one to make plays? I know you lost your defensive tackle, but I'm not worried about that. What I'm worried about is, can your team be the one that we are talking about coming out with the critical drives on third down? You are forcing South Carolina to punt in its own backfield. And by the way, Willie B is no slouch. If you have ever seen a college football game that is under the radar, I promise you it comes in Columbia, South Carolina. That is an atmosphere where the fans wake up early in the morning and they will stay late into the evening to watch their Gamecocks hopefully pull out the dub. And this, for my money, is an even keel matchup that is only going to be decided by how these two teams play with the mental mistakes and also the finite details. I know what you're getting in the passing attack. What am I getting in this ground game that potentially is going to make me feel a lot more confident in LSU when they have to play against an Alabama, against an Ole Miss, against potentially even, you could say, a Texas if they were to go toe-to-toe with them at some point. Let's talk about Oklahoma. Oklahoma, to me, is one of these teams where I believe that the offensive line is correctable. I believe that the injuries at the start of the year have just been far too much to overcome at times. And you're going to see a 16-12 final against a Houston team that got boat raced by UNLV and say, well, that means season's over. We're not that good. Let's all pump the brakes. Oklahoma fans, let's pump the brakes. National media, let's pump the brakes. Let Cole Thompson, the guy who has been very high on the Sooners Nation, bring you back to reality. It's okay to have some struggles. It's a brand new offensive line. It's a brand new quarterback being broken in with a new offensive coordinator that he hasn't spent a lot of time working with on live reps. He has in the offseason, he has in a bowl game, he hasn't in live reps. It's a wide receiver core that has been missing players. Jalik Farouk has been out. Nick Anderson has been out. Your defense played well. You got a big-time safety. So you see that there is life here. You got to put it together against Tulane. I'll tell you what, John Summerall is a guy that is waiting and chomping at the bits to get an SEC job. And I'll tell you what, the guy is going to turn down other Power 4 jobs because of what Tulane is. Tulane is a team that is very promising, and it's so funny that I believe that Willie Fritz was one of the best hires of the offseason, and yet still somehow Tulane upgraded with its head coach. Summerall can wait. Summerall has his defense playing up to par. He brought a lot of players over from Troy that know what he expects as a persona inside that locker room. They've carried it on over. They played down to the wire against Kansas State last week at home. Can you set a tone with your deep ball accuracy if you're Jackson Arnold? Can you as a defense force this Tulane Green Wave to basically stay away from the bay? Can they not come near shore? Can they just have to go ahead and crash in the middle of the ocean and they're nowhere near the end zone? That shoreline is the end zone. Can you keep them on third and inconsistent? Can you keep them on third and uncomfortable? Because if you do that, well, now you're talking about getting back on the right course before Josh Heupel and this Tennessee Volunteers team comes to town. I think Oklahoma is going to be fine. I think they're going to be good. But I got to see you actually do it against a group of 5 school that probably is playing for a spot in the college football playoff. Like it or not, but a dub over OU is probably the biggest win for any group of 5 program at this point. Let's talk about Missouri. And I know I'm going to piss off some people because Missouri's my team. Missouri's my team this year. The deep ball's got to be there. Something just feels off with Brady Cook. I don't know if it's just because of you feel like that you want to play more consistent. You want to just attack the middle of the field. Maybe it's because the offensive line is still kind of going through some growing pains, but the deep ball has not been there. The most mind-boggling stat that still is really, really challenging to believe is Brady Cook has 1 touchdown and 1 interception in 2 games. And it is against FCS Murray State, and it is against Buffalo. Your run game has been awesome. Let's not mix anything up. The fact that you lost Cody Schrader and you maybe upgraded in terms of a yin and yang combination. You didn't get the same locker room aura, but you got the talent in Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll. You feel really good about that. Do you guys know right now that those two are averaging 5.5 yards combined? Oh, and on top of that, they have 3 rushing touchdowns. So they're doing some things. Your defense has been great. Your defense has been phenomenal. Blake Baker is probably right now wondering, if I would have stayed out in Como, would I have been a college football playoff team? Would I have been a part of a college? Would I have maybe been a head coach and waiting elsewhere? He's probably happy with that $2 million, but at the same time, you pitched a shutout in back-to-back games. Well, now you get to have a real test. And I didn't think I was going to be saying this at the start of the year, and I don't think many of you thought you're going to be saying this. But Boston College looks legit. They look great defensively. They look great in the trenches. They play a physical brand of football. They take the fight to you, and also they've shown that they can win on the road. They went into Doak Campbell Stadium, and they heard as, went to, crap, we're 0-2. That's what they heard. Do you want to be that team that now starts off 2-1 before Vanderbilt comes to town? Probably not. And especially when you realize that this is now a ranked game, every win is sustainable. And more importantly, it's promising to you being a college football playoff team. You got to realize that people have been laughing at Missouri's schedule. Well, now you get a ranked opponent. Now you get an ACC squad that probably is better than advertised because they got a head coach that had been winning in the NFL for the last several years. He also worked with the Heisman Trophy winner quarterback. And he's got a pretty damn good quarterback in Thomas Castellanos that probably can boot, scoot, and boogie like Brooks and Dunn into the end zone for an easy 6 points and make things interesting. So a win over this team is actually not like a good win. It's a great one. Any top 25 matchup that you get to put in your back pocket is sustainable. That's helping you take that next step. I'm still in the wait and see mode with Missouri. I believe that you are a top 10 team. But if you don't have the offensive identity with the firepower that can take the top off your defense, with Luther Burden, with Theo Weiss, with Marquise Johnson, with all this talent, it's hard for me to kind of buy in. Let's talk about also one more, and this one also is painful, Alabama. Alabama, I think, is actually there when it comes to a proponent, when it comes to the overall roster and the aura of this team. They should be a playoff contender. I believe they are a playoff contender. What I also believe is that they don't have the depth on the offensive line to hold them for a 12-game period. You watched last week is what happened when you did not have both Elijah Pritchett and Caden Proctor out there. Good God. It is almost unwatchable. It is almost like you have to throw a TVMA thing right up here in the corner and say, kids, look away. You don't want to see this because if it's probably going to be very disgusting and horrifying for you. It was not a clean game. The scoreboard lies to you, and there are going to be many people that did not pay attention to that game because they saw USF, and they said, oh, we don't have to watch this. Well, you did because Alex Golish is ready, and he has said on multiple occasions, yeah, we play Alabama, but Alabama plays us, and he's right. They have, and they played down to the wire both times. Yeah, they scored 21 points in the last 6 minutes. That is peak Alabama. When you think about that last 6 minutes of a football game, that's the version of Alabama that can hold its own against Tennessee, against Georgia, against LSU, against Texas, against A&M, against anybody that comes into their building or anybody that they have to go travel against. They can be that team, but it's got to be that way for 45 to 50 minutes. You're allowed to have a blundering mistake. You're allowed to have a bad snap. You're allowed to have questionable play calling. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. But for 6 minutes of play, that's not going to work when you take on LSU in Death Valley. It's not going to work when you go travel to Rocky Top in Knoxville to take on Tennessee. It's not going to work when you have to face a Missouri team that can win over the top. It's not. And so this is a good week to get right if you're playing a Wisconsin squad. They also feel like a team that probably at its peak could be about 8-9 wins, maybe even a contender dark horse for the Big 12 title game, but they're not great when it comes to their depth. Can your depth outwork their depth, and can you handle hearing jump around with a good 2-touchdown lead before you have to go ahead and play out the fourth quarter? Now let's move on to the contender category. I'm going to say the best two for last. Absolutely, Tennessee belongs in this category. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I was wrong. I have admitted multiple times. I can't believe that I picked NC State to keep this thing close. But it had nothing to do with the offense. Nico Iamaleava looked fine. I think that a lot of people are going to say, how dare you say he was fine? No, I'm saying it's all correctable. He looked phenomenal against UT Chattanooga. He looked fine against NC State. The reason you won that game was because your defense is elite. You had the best defensive line in the SEC for my money. When you look at what James Pierce Jr. can do on the regular, it's horrifying. You had the most underrated linebacking core in the country. Peely is a stud. Last year, if he would have played, what this team could have been, good God. I mean, we are literally talking about you having Joe Milton overshot a receiver and hitting a fan with a bag of popcorn in the third row, and you still probably would have been a 10-win roster. That's what you would have been if you had Peely in your middle of your linebacking field. You like your you like your cornerback play. You like your safety play, and it's all correctable. And then you talk about this offense. Dylan Sampson is a legit number one running back. Anybody who was saying he can't take over for a Jalen Wright or Jabari Small, well, they have small minds and they have small takes, and that's why we don't listen to those people. Also, every transfer has looked great. The offensive line is phenomenal. Zalance Hurd is a blessing in disguise that now you have at left tackle blocking for Nico. Dante Thornton has come on so strong in the last 2 weeks after in what would be an overall underwhelming first year in Knoxville. You see Chris Brazo making the highlight plays. Brew McCoy back fully healthy. Holden Stays got involved in this game. So everything that you saw from Tennessee is now sustainable on both sides of the football. And what's crazy is that you remember that team that went to the Orange Bowl and beat Clemson. They had one of the best offenses in college football. They had one of the worst secondaries. They won't have one of the worst secondaries this year. They won't have one of the worst pass rushes this year. They won't have one of the worst linebacking cores this year. And so a team that went down to the wire and probably would have been in the college football playoff conversation at least for one more week if Hendon Hooker doesn't get hurt is back with the same aura and the same entity. That's what you get to face off against whenever you go to Rocky Top. I feel truly bad for Kent State. The Golden Flashes, they will have no flash on Saturday. In fact, the only flash that you will see is of the cameras taking photos of Nico as he continues his pace to potentially be a Heisman Trophy candidate. And an actual Heisman Trophy candidate is Jackson Dart with Ole Miss. Ole Miss looks legit. I don't want to hear it. Oh, but who had they played? Cole, ladies and gentlemen, let me make this abundantly clear. How you play against the bad teams or the teams that you think are not up to your level is a reason why you believe in this team. They have allowed 3 points in 2 games defensively. They're great. The entire front seven looks completely night and day difference. JJ Pegas looks great. Jared Ivey looks great. Walter Nolan looks great. Chris Paul Jr. looks great. The secondary looks phenomenal. And I get it. The level of competition that you're going up against has certainly been underwhelming, to say the least. But Jackson Dart looks awesome. The guy just set an NCAA record for the most consecutive passes in a football game. Oh, and on top of that, he's not even worried about the Heisman Trophy. If you listen to Jim Rome, he says, no, I'm thinking about that natty. And you know what? This team can do it. Because now they have a run game. And the best part is that Henry Parrish Jr. looks like the leading man, but you also know what Ulysses Bentley can do. You've seen what he can be when he has to take over as the lead back and also the man in the middle, the voice of reason for this team. And I think that you're going to see a Rashad Amos game come out of the blue, not so distant future. I think you're going to see a Micah Davis game come out in the not so distant future, the wide receiver from Utah State. And that's including what you've already seen from Trey Harris, Caden Prescorn, Jordan Watkins, and Juice Walls. So you tell me where this team is stoppable. You tell me where, when this team is giving you its best punch, how you can counteract it. I'll stop you. You can't. When you get Ole Miss playing its brand of football at its peak, it is an unstoppable force, and the only unmovable object that stands in their way is probably themselves. Let's talk about Texas. We got to talk about Texas. For me personally, I think that right now, this is the team that you may not want to see on Saturdays. And that's not an insult to Georgia. Georgia, for my money, is still the best team in college football. But you remember going into that game, there were many people talking about how the weather's changing. It's going to be big blue. The maize and the blue is coming out in droves. It's the big house. You know, we're going to have a good old Big Ten bully football. And then you watch as the team that is brand new to the SEC bullied the Big Ten for 3.5 quarters and then allowed a late touchdown because, you know what, screw it, just want to give them a mercies touchdown. That's a team that is built to win in the SEC. That is not a Big 12 team. It is a blessing in disguise the way that you have watched Steve Sarkisian and Kyle Flood build up this offensive line, where they can lose a starter and immediately feel like, yeah, we're good with Cam Williams. And by the way, Cam Williams was the one fault of that offensive line with a couple of penalties, and that was it. His overall play was not bad. His penalties were bad. And if that's all we're going to get against a Michigan team, okay, well, what are we going to look like when we play against, I don't know, UTSA this weekend? What are we going to look like when we play against Mississippi State? What are we going to look like when we play Florida or Kentucky or any of these teams that people are saying could be quote-unquote trap games because of we just know that we're better? That's what you have. And by the way, the thing about Steve Sarkisian is he hasn't decided to turn the knob off of the speed element. Oh, yeah, there's still speed and lightning in the bottle at wide receiver and running back. And the young guys are taking on the mantle and acting like veterans. Jarrett Gibson, Trey Wisner, those are dudes that are just getting acclimated with college life. And they're like, hey, yeah, we're really good at playing football. Oh, Jaden Blue, CJ Baxter, you sit this one out against the defending national champions. We got this in our bag. And the wide receiver core, they know what they are. Everyone has an assigned role. Everyone can be that guy. Big play, home run threat, that's Silas Bolden. Down the sidelines for an easy 20-yard pickup, that's Isaiah Bond. Inside the red zone, it's Matthew Golden. Gunnar Helm is getting involved in the passing attack. You know what you also got in guys such as Jonte Cook and Ryan Wingo. They get to be involved. The fact that you have this team humming on all three faces and special teams as well, which we don't give enough credit to. One major mistake in that game was Bert Auburn missing the field goal on the first drive. And after that, Texas said, all right, we got the kinks out of the way. Let's go to work. They will do that against every single opponent that they face going into 2024. And last and certainly not least is Georgia. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. You watched as Clemson dismantled, thwarted, absolutely picked apart. Literally, it was a massacre out in Happy Valley or Death Valley or whatever the hell you want to call it. It's neither one. We'll just call it Clemson Stadium against Appalachian State. It was disgusting. It was awful. They couldn't do a damn thing against Georgia. And in my opinion, that says more about Georgia than it says about Clemson. Clemson is a team that probably is going to stick around and fight for a spot in the college football playoff in a weaker ACC. Georgia could dismantle every team in the ACC with its backups, and they wouldn't miss a beat. They would be fundamentally sound. There would be no turnovers. There would be 0 penalties in that game. They would be playing consistent football. Georgia is on a mission this year to find a way to prove to the world that last season, when they were kept out of the college football playoff, the wrong team won the national title. And that's why when they went out, they brought in names from the transfer portal. They were guys that were plug-and-play replacements and dudes that could easily take over every single Saturday. You watch it. Colby Young looks really good. London Humphreys looks really good. You're seeing as now younger guys like Oscar Delp and Dylan Bell are getting involved. Trevor Etienne in his first game against Tennessee Tech looked really good. Nate Frazier does not look like a freshman. Their defensive line was phenomenal for 4 quarters. Oh, and by the way, KJ Bolden looks like Malachi Stark 2.0. You tell me where this team is at fault. They are the epitome of college football, and until someone finds a way to knock them off their pedestal, they are the standard in the SEC. And for my money, they're also the standard in the sport in general. But let me know in the comment section down below. What do you think is a team that is ranked too low, too high? Do you believe that these are contenders? Do you believe that these are pretenders? Like, rate, review, subscribe. Make sure that you're following us on all the social channels as well. TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Follow me on Twitter at Mr. Cole Thompson and check out all of our great work. Make sure you visit secunfiltered.com. I'm Cole Thompson. Until next time, folks. Later.